Solo: A Star Wars Story just dropped yesterday, and after all these years, we finally got to see whatever the hell this movie was supposed to be. Now, I realize plenty of people are not rushing to see Solo, so I'm not going to do what I did for Infinity War and just cover spoilers. We're going to do non-spoilers and then spoilers afterwards, so my non-spoilers thoughts on Solo, just very general, all-encompassing, it's fine. The movie is good. I'm glad Ron Howard was able to come in, use his masterful directing skills, and bring the movie back from oblivion, because everything obviously fell apart with Phil Lord and Chris Miller and all of the production troubles that ensued. They were able to reel it back in and pull this movie back together, which is great. So it's good. It's decent. It's fine. I wasn't blown away. I wasn't necessarily having a blast the entire time, but it's decent. Check it out when you get the chance. See Infinity War first, maybe Deadpool 2 if you care, but I wouldn't say there's any major rush to go see Solo unless you are just a die-hard Han Solo fan, which I personally am not, but I of course still love Han. Or if you just want a quick, fun time at the theater, that's what you'll get here. It's fine. And Alden Ehrenreich is also fine. You know, he works as Han. There are a lot of people saying he is Han Solo. No, you know, like he did an incredible job, and it was okay. He definitely nails the charisma of Harrison Ford in a lot of scenes, but unfortunately the concerns I had going in were pretty much accurate the entire time, whereas it's not necessarily consistent. So he's Han Solo here, but he's not Han Solo there. He's Han Solo in this scene, but then in the next scene he's just random charismatic guy who's still capable of leading the movie. Not necessarily Han Solo. Chewbacca is fantastic in the movie. Emilia Clarke as Qi'ra was great. Donald Glover is perfect as Lando. I honestly think in the scenes that he had as Lando throughout the movie, he did a better job capturing Lando than Alden did capturing Han the entire time. But again, it wasn't bad. You know, it's just, again, I cannot stress enough, the movie is fine. And Solo is also just a gorgeous movie. It is so well put together. I mean, not in terms of pacing, but I'm more so referring to visuals and just the overall directing style. I mean, Ron Howard did a fantastic job. Of course he did. It's Ron Howard. But the problem I had with the movie overall is that I'm constantly looking for a reason to care other than, hey, it's Han Solo, and just run with it, which is pretty much the whole movie. Because beyond Han's basic origins and seeing how he got his name, where he came from, seeing Corellia for the first time, how Han and Chewie meet, I just never cared after that. It was cool when he met Lando. You know, all these connections are in there that were referenced in the original trilogy. I just never cared about the all-encompassing plot because it just never really seemed to matter, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it still makes the movie feel very shallow to me for some reason. It's very empty. I walked out of Solo basically thinking, okay, this could have been a book. This could have been a series of comics and it would have been just as good. I could have just as easily listened to an audio version of this on Audible and had the same experience, because it just didn't necessarily need to be a movie. And there are plenty of people that have said, okay, but just because something doesn't need to be a movie doesn't mean it can be a movie, doesn't mean it can be an incredible movie, and I completely agree, but then they have to meet you halfway and actually make it into an incredible movie, which Solo really isn't. That's pretty much all I have to say without spoilers, so if you have not seen Solo: A Star Wars Story, I'm going into full spoilers now. This is your warning. I'll give you a couple seconds. And okay. So I loved a lot of Han's origins. Again, seeing Corellia, Qi'ra, and how they were basically lifelong best friends up until they eventually separated when they both tried to escape. And then how Han, you know, enlisted on the fly into the Empire just to get out of the situation and then got the name Solo from the Empire, which I thought was definitely an odd choice, if I'm being totally honest. And then beyond that, it was really great to see like that Warzone sequence, which I really feel like we needed more of in Rogue One, where he meets Beckett and Val on the battlefield. So that was all great. I never really cared about Beckett or his crew. They didn't matter. He never seemed to matter. I mean, these people are never brought up again in continuity ever. I mean, that's the one problem about these characters that I figured was going to still be a problem even after this movie, is these people are never brought up again. I mean, Beckett teaches him so much and gives him his iconic blaster. Kira is his lifelong best friend, potentially even his first love that he would do anything for. And this story inevitably, I'm sure, develops into, you know, an ultimate betrayal especially after you see the end of this movie. And so it's very odd to me. And this is the problem with inserting characters into pre-established continuity. These people are never brought up again in conversation, and obviously he wouldn't necessarily talk about them to Leia, but they're never even implied to anyone ever again. I'm sure there are going to be efforts by the story group to remedy that in upcoming, you know, Star Wars books and comics and what have you, but it's very odd when watching the movie when you have that thought in the back of your mind. Now, the Kessel Run was odd as well, because I'm watching it and they're like, no one's done the Kessel Run, and they just they make a beeline, they make a sharp left into wherever the hell they go, and they reach this gravity well called the Maw, and they encounter this massive tentacle creature. And the way the Kessel Run always sounded to me was that, like, it was some kind of race. It was some kind of accomplishment of Han's incredible piloting skills, his incredible navigational skills. That was the impression I got from the original trilogy. And then you get to the actual Kessel Run, and then they just take a drop of the coaxium and get a boost, and that's how they're able to make it through. And also they use the navigational systems and the, you know, from the droid. And by the way, the droid was alright. The droid was, I could see why a lot of people didn't necessarily like her. I thought she didn't really take away from the movie all that much. It was kind of weird. The relationship they tried to push with her and Lando, that was bizarre. But overall, she was no BB-8. She's no K2. She's not R2-D2. She was just kind of like a human in a droid's body. It was kind of weird. The equal rights thing and like freeing all the droids was kind of funny, I suppose. But so of course, back to the Kessel Run, when she ultimately is destroyed and they plug her navigational systems into the Millennium Falcon to pull off the Kessel Run, I was just kind of like, when they did it and Han hops off the Falcon, he's like, we just did the Kessel Run in 12 parsecs. I was like, oh, that was it? Like, I thought it was like an escape or something. That's not what I imagined the Kessel Run to be, if I'm honest. So it was very strange, man. Because it really didn't seem like Han had too big of a role in it other than just kind of timing. So the Kessel Run was weird. It was okay, but I kind of wish that it would have just stayed a story that we never actually saw. One thing that Solo does really well is connectivity, which I really wasn't expecting from Larry Kasdan, and I assume a lot of it came from his son, who's a big fan of episode 1, 2, and 3. And especially, you know, after Ron Howard came on board, I didn't really expect to see this connectivity. I kind of expected something more in line with the style of JJ with The Force Awakens and Rian Johnson with The Last Jedi, where the connections to the rest of the universe are either just not even there to begin with, or you just see like maybe one Quarren in the back of Canto Bight, or, you know, Chewbacca's a Wookiee. And so obviously there are all new planets throughout this movie. I don't think they ever visit a familiar planet. But they do have all the connective tissue that you would expect from these films. Not to the point where it detours from the movie, but just the connections in the background so that you remember we're all in the same universe here. Episode 1, 2, and 3 still happened 15 years ago, and the original trilogy is about to pick up, and they remind you of that by mentioning planets. I mean, in the same scene, Lando commends Beckett for killing Aurra Sing from the Clone Wars, and of course she showed up in the Phantom Menace first, but you know what I mean. And then he mentions something about Felucia in the same scene. Like, that was great. You see Twi'leks in I think it was the same room that the Crimson Dawn, you know, like their whole whatever the hell the party was going on. You see a Twi'lek in there, and you actually feel like you're back in the Star Wars universe. There's a Rodian that's a part of Enfys Nest's Marauder gang, or whatever the hell they are. I wasn't really into the Enfys Nest storyline. I thought it was fine. I never really cared. They were just kind of there. But I mean, yeah, it was great. Like, I mean, there was mention of the Pike Syndicate. They never actually showed up from the Clone Wars. You had Kashyyyk. They didn't shy away. I was very surprised. They mentioned Kashyyyk like twice. Han mentions it right away when he meets Chewie. And speaking of the scene where they meet, that was depressing to know that after the events of the Clone Wars and Revenge of the Sith, obviously we know Kashyyyk is taken over by the Empire once more. It's assumed, and of course it does happen. That's canon. But just to see that Chewie ended up on this random planet on Mimban, just like a freaking caged animal eating people, that was grim. That was really dark. But then, of course, to address the big elephant in the room, Maul is revealed to be the villain of it all. He is the man behind the scenes running the Crimson Dawn organization, and he basically rebranded the Shadow Collective from back in the Clone Wars to the Crimson Dawn. He's been operating under the radar since the events of the Clone Wars, which is great. That was awesome. The scene opens, Kira inserts the ring into the panel, and the hologram activates. You hear Sam Witwer's voice, and then you see Ray Park actually properly aged. It looks like time has passed, unlike Rebels. And it was really awesome. I loved it. It was so exciting in the moment. It was incredible. I mean, I always knew that Kira was obviously not telling everyone everything. She was hiding something, and of course it was the fact that she works for Maul, and it made sense. I can imagine Maul taking Kira around the galaxy, him and the Crimson Dawn, and doing some pretty god-awful things. I mean, when Maul first showed up in the Clone Wars, he slaughtered an entire village of innocent people just to get Obi-Wan's attention. That just made the story so complete for me. It was great. But there are a series of problems here, because now the Obi-Wan movie with Ewan McGregor is becoming pretty much all but confirmed again. That movie's gonna happen in probably like 2020. But here's the problem, everyone. If this scene is supposed to set up anything beyond just fan service for that one sequence, and they actually are trying to set up Maul potentially being in an Obi-Wan Solo movie, the problem here is they destroyed the conclusion to his story in Star Wars Rebels Season 3, Episode 18 on Disney XD, which is awful. And I understand plenty of people think that was a great conclusion to Maul's story. I could not disagree more. They focused more on Obi-Wan and just paying homages to samurai films, and they actually did, making Maul more than just a freak of the week villain that they treated him as in that episode, because Maul is this dark, this god-awful monster that surfaced as the first Sith Lord in over 1,000 years that killed his master and then he had to kill in return. He comes back, wreaks havoc on him later in life, kills the person he loved that he was willing to leave the Jedi Order for, and pretty much just terrorizes the galaxy once more, nearly destroys Mandalore as a society. Palpatine himself has to intervene because of the threat Maul poses to his grand design, and to treat him as just this blind rage monster was really disappointing, and especially the fact that it was done in an episode where Ezra and Chopper just stick around for 2/3 of it. And it's a shame because it was rushed. I don't agree with any of it, and I could go into more detail than that and break it down even more for you, but I just don't understand what they plan on doing here, because let's entertain the idea to pulling that episode of Rebels out of canon. They rip it out of canon. That would open a whole can of worms, but just entertaining the idea, let's think about it. Okay, here's the problem though. They used Sam Witwer for the voice of Maul, which tells me, even though it was great to have Ray Park, what are they going to do for a full-length feature film? Just dub over Ray Park with Sam Witwer the entire time? That's not going to work. That's going to really pull a lot of people out of the movie. That's not sustainable for 2.5 hours, 2 hours, 15 minutes. So I am more so confused than I am excited about Maul showing up at the end of Solo: A Star Wars Story. It's great. It's awesome. It really ties the story together very well. And it's so awesome because we don't really know what Maul was doing in those 15 years leading up to Rebels. Or 16, 17 years, whatever it was. So I'm excited to a point. And watching Solo, I was excited to a point. The movie is okay. It's a fun time, but that's it. Solo: A Star Wars Story is just okay. It's a quick, fun movie, and hopefully that's enough for a lot of you. I really hope a lot of you disagree with me on this one. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. And if you enjoyed me rambling on about Solo: A Star Wars Story, then definitely consider checking out my Patreon page. It is linked below. I've been posting all kinds of progress updates and photos of my upcoming Killmonger as I work on him and get him ready for a proper preview photo of the figure, where I always post all my minifigures. Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Links to all three of those are always down in the description below. Way easier to post a preview photo of the minifigure than it is to actually finish them and make the entire video. So yeah, I also just launched the store on mgfcustoms.com, as you might have seen in my last video, and the Discord server, MGF Land, is now live, and it's linked below. So yeah, I think that's it though, and I'll catch you guys in the next one, which will probably be Ant-Man and the Wasp next time I talk about a movie, and I'll see you guys then. All right, bye-bye.